No one in that room could truly explain what they were witnessing. The veterinarian lifted the newborn into the golden light, and a heavy silence fell over everyone. "That is simply not possible," he eventually whispered. "Is that even a kitten?" "I am not entirely certain," came the reply. 14 days earlier, Elias did not even own a cat. It was a Tuesday evening in the final days of February. The air had grown jagged and freezing, the type of cold that pierces through a heavy coat the second you leave your vehicle. Elias pulled into the fuel station on Highway 9. He was exhausted and only wanted to fill his tank and reach his house. He stepped out of his truck and started the pump. That was when he spotted her. A petite gray cat squeezed against the bottom of a vending machine, partially concealed behind a waste bin. Her ears were flattened against her head. Her eyes were massive, a pale shade of green and cloudy with pure fatigue. She observed him as if she were waiting for a sign. Elias knelt down. He reached into his front seat and grabbed the leftovers of his meal, half of a turkey sandwich. He pulled off a small fragment and offered it. The cat remained frozen. 1 second. 2. 5. Then she took one cautious step forward, then another. She was skeletal everywhere. Her ribs were visible and her coat was dull, except for her stomach, which was remarkably round. She ate directly from his fingertips at a slow pace, as if she feared the nourishment might vanish if she moved too quickly. "Hey there," Elias spoke softly. "It is all right. You are safe now." She looked up at him, and a profound connection formed between them. He could not put it into words. It was not a cinematic moment. There were no sweeping violins playing. It was simply a weary man and a terrified cat in a parking lot on a freezing Tuesday night. He finished fueling his truck, climbed back inside, and checked his mirror. She was still sitting there, perched next to the pump, watching him depart. He sat there with his engine idling for 30 full seconds. Then he let out a long sigh. "All right," he said under his breath. "You win." He walked back to the passenger side and opened the door wide. The cat looked at the open door, then at him, then at the door once more. And she climbed inside just like that, as if she had been waiting for the formal invitation. Before we continue the story, please take 2 seconds to like and subscribe. It truly assists the channel in growing, and believe me, you do not want to miss the conclusion of this journey. When he reached his home, the cat walked through the front door ahead of him as if she already possessed the deed to the property. He named her Mira. He did not know why. The name simply appeared in his mind the moment he looked at her. That first night at the house of Elias was difficult. Mira hid under the sofa and refused to emerge for any reason. Elias did not pressure her. He just set a bowl of water near the edge and a small dish of tuna next to it. At 2 a.m, he heard the quiet crunch of her eating in the darkness, and he smiled to himself. By the 3rd day, however, something began to change. Mira moved from beneath the sofa to the window ledge. She sat in the afternoon sunlight, watching the birds outside. By the conclusion of the first week, she was following him everywhere. The house, which had felt very hollow since Elias moved in alone 2 years ago, suddenly contained life. A low purr, soft paws on the wood floors, and the muffled sound of a cat shifting positions in the night. He had not realized how lonely it was before. And then he noticed something he likely should have seen much sooner. The belly of Mira was round, exceptionally round. He thought back to that night at the fuel station. Her body had been thin everywhere except her middle. He had assumed she was swollen from malnutrition, but he was mistaken. Mira was expecting. Elias laughed softly when the realization struck him. "Well," he said, rubbing his brow, "I suppose we are expecting a family." At first, everything appeared perfectly routine. Mira ate well, slept constantly, and became even more loving than before. She followed Elias everywhere like a tiny gray shadow. She seemed content, safe, and loved. But after another week, something began to trouble him. Her stomach kept expanding, and it was not the slow, steady growth the articles mentioned. This was rapid, almost frightening. Her small gray frame looked nearly absurd under the pressure. Something about the situation just did not feel right. One evening, his older sister Elena drove over for a meal. She walked through the entrance, saw Mira on the sofa, and stopped in her tracks. "Elias," she said slowly, "are you certain that is normal?" "I believe so," he answered. But even he could detect the uncertainty in his own voice. Elena knelt next to the cat and gently felt her stomach. Mira did not even flinch. The eyebrows of Elena rose high. "She feels like she is carrying a heavy stone in there. This is not right." Elias brushed it off. He told himself the internet said every pregnancy was unique. But that night after Elena departed, he sat next to Mira on the sofa and placed his hand on her belly. Something about the weight started to deeply worry him. He called his uncle Silas the following day. Silas had owned cats his whole life. He had seen dozens of litters born out in his barn. He took one single look at Mira and his expression shifted entirely. "That is a massive belly for such a petite cat," Silas remarked. His voice held genuine alarm. "Should I see a specialist?" Elias asked. "I would, and I would do it immediately." Elias called the nearest animal clinic. The earliest available time was 5 days away. He reserved it, noted the date on his calendar, and told Mira everything was going to be just fine. But here was the issue. Mira did not wait 5 days. 3 nights later, Elias woke up suddenly at 1 in the morning. Mira was not on the bed. He found her in the nesting box, breathing heavily. Her green eyes were wide and glassy. She was in labor, right now, tonight. The heart of Elias was racing. He grabbed his phone and his fingers actually trembled as he searched through his contacts. He did not call the clinic. The office was 40 minutes away in the middle of the night. Instead, he called the one person he trusted who lived close enough to assist him, Julianne, the veterinary student who lived in the yellow house directly across the street. He had helped deliver calves, puppies, and once an entire group of ferrets during a blackout. Julian picked up on the second ring. "What is wrong? Mira is in labor. I need your help right now." Julian arrived in under 4 minutes. He had a small bag with him containing towels, gloves, and a lamp. He knelt beside the nesting box. "All right, let us see what we have here." The first kitten arrived quickly, small, gray, and damp. It let out a tiny cry. "Perfect." Elias exhaled for what felt like the first time in an hour. Julian smiled. A beautiful and normal delivery. 7 minutes later, the second kitten came. It was even smaller, a little tabby with faint lines. Mira pulled it close to her. 2 healthy kittens. Elias felt the relief wash through his entire frame. Julian nodded. "Everything looks totally normal. She might be finished." But Mira was not finished. Her body tightened again. Her breathing turned labored and quick. Minutes passed. Nothing happened. Julian checked her again. And this time, Elias caught something in his gaze. A flicker of anxiety that was not there before. 5 minutes, then 10. Elias could not stop walking across the room. Julian laid out fresh towels. His calm exterior remained, but barely. And then Mira pushed, and the third kitten was born. Julian lifted it onto the clean towel, and then he stopped. His hands just hung there in the air. He stared down at the newborn. "Oh," was all he managed to say. Elias stepped closer. "What? What is it?" Julian turned the kitten over gently, and now Elias saw it too. This kitten was gigantic. Compared to the first 2, it looked like it belonged to a completely different species. Its paws were the size of the heads of the other kittens. Its fur was already dense and soft, and its tail stretched long and bushy behind it. The kitten opened its mouth and let out a cry, a deep, powerful sound that filled the entire room. Elias just blinked his eyes. "Is that actually a kitten?" Julian stared at it with an expression caught somewhere between confusion and pure wonder. "I honestly do not know." Neither of them slept that night. They watched Mira feed all 3 of her babies. The 2 small ones were tucked against her stomach like they were supposed to be. The large one took up as much space as both of them combined. And here was the beautiful thing. Mira did not seem worried at all. But Elias could not stop staring at the third kitten. It was not ill. It was not deformed. It was just impossibly and ridiculously large. It was as if someone had snuck a month-old kitten into a newborn litter, as some kind of strange joke. By morning, Elias had made up his mind. He was not waiting for his original appointment. He loaded Mira and all 3 kittens into a large box lined with towels and drove straight to the animal care center. The receptionist smiled when he entered. Then she looked into the box. The smile vanished from her face. "Wait, they were all born at the same time?" "Last night," Elias stated. "All 3 of them." She called a coworker over, then another, then another. Within minutes, 4 staff members were huddled around this box. They stared at the giant kitten and spoke in hushed tones. Someone took a photograph on their phone. "Are you absolutely certain that one is not older?" a technician asked. Elias felt his patience getting thin. "I watched it being born in my bedroom about 6 hours ago." Finally, the senior veterinarian walked in. Dr. Sterling, 62 years old, with a gray beard and thick spectacles, and 35 years of experience. He approached the table, lifted the giant kitten with both hands, and began a detailed examination. The entire room went silent. Everyone just watched him. Dr. Sterling set the kitten back down, removed his glasses, cleaned them slowly on his shirt, and put them back on. "Well," he said, "I can confirm one thing." Elias held his breath. "It is definitely a cat." The whole room exhaled. Someone laughed out loud. The tension simply broke. Dr. Sterling chuckled along with them. "Just a very large one." And then he explained something that most people have no knowledge of. A single litter of kittens can actually have multiple fathers. It is a process called superfecundation. Different genetics, different size potential, and different everything. Doctor. Sterling pointed to the giant paws of the kitten, the tufts of fur growing between the toes, the wide ears, and the thick, luxurious coat. Based on this bone structure and this fur pattern, he said the father of this particular kitten was almost certainly a very large breed. My best guess is a Maine Coon. Elias repeated the name. The largest domestic cat breed. Males regularly reach 25 pounds and more. Their kittens are born larger, they grow faster, and they develop on a completely different timeline. Elias looked back at the kitten. So, he is going to be huge? Elias asked. Doctor, Sterling just smiled. You have absolutely no idea. Elias named the giant kitten Atlas. It felt like a name that carried weight, and it fit perfectly. Over the next several weeks, the difference between Atlas and his siblings became shocking. The two small kittens grew at a totally normal pace. They doubled in size, learned to walk, and tumbled over each other in that cute way kittens do. Perfectly ordinary. Atlas was far from ordinary. By 4 weeks, he was triple the size of his siblings. By 8 weeks, he outweighed most adult cats in the neighborhood. His fur grew thick and wild and almost majestic. His paws were enormous. The friends of Elias could not believe their eyes when they visited. His sister Elena brought her children over, and they shouted with joy when Atlas moved toward them like a small furry tank. That is not a cat, his nephew announced with confidence. That is a baby bear. Even total strangers took notice. When Elias posted a photo online of Mira lying with all 3 kittens, the comments just exploded. People flat out refused to believe they were from the same litter. Someone accused him of faking the image. A veterinary student joined in with a long comment about superfecundation, but behind all the excitement, Elias faced a real and difficult question. He could not keep all 3 kittens. His house was small, his budget was limited, he loved every one of them. But he knew deep down that they deserved more room and more attention than he alone could provide. Finding homes turned out to be both easier and harder than he expected. His colleague Sarah from the office had been talking about getting a kitten for months. She drove over on a Saturday afternoon, planning to adopt just one. But when she arrived, the 2 small kittens were tangled together on the sofa, fast asleep with their tiny paws intertwined. Sarah watched them for a long, quiet moment. She tried to separate them. The little tabby woke up, looked around confused, and immediately crawled right back to its gray sibling. Sarah laughed. Well, I guess I am taking both of them. Elias smiled, though the feeling was bittersweet. He watched her drive away with 2 tiny faces looking through the carrier doors. He waved until the car disappeared around the corner. Now only Atlas remained. This massive, ridiculous, and endlessly lovable kitten. He sat in the middle of the living room like a small furry boulder, his golden eyes tracking Elias around the house. He purred so loudly it truly sounded like a small engine running. Elias loved Atlas, but he also knew something important that he had known for weeks. Julian loved Atlas too. Julian had been part of this story. He helped deliver Atlas into the world. He checked on the litter every single day after that. He brought special kitten formula when Mira struggled to produce enough milk. And here was the thing that really settled it. Every single time Julian visited, Atlas went straight to him. Every time without fail, Atlas climbed into the lap of Julian and he followed him all the way to the door when Julian left. It was so obvious to everyone. One quiet evening, Elias finally brought it up. They were both sitting on the front porch. Atlas was sprawled across the legs of Julian, nearly overflowing off both sides. He chose you, Elias said. You know that, right? Julian looked down at Atlas. The giant kitten was purring so hard his whole body vibrated. I have always wanted a big cat, Julian admitted. Ever since I was a child, my grandmother had a forest cat. 16 pounds of pure personality. I have wanted one like that my entire life. Then take him, Elias said. He belongs with you. Julian hesitated. Are you sure? I am sure. Besides, you live right across the street. I will see him every day. Julian grinned. That next weekend, Atlas officially moved across the street. Julian had prepared everything. A massive cat tree that reached the ceiling, oversized food bowls, and a bed actually designed for a medium-sized dog. Atlas explored every inch of the new house, sniffed every corner, and immediately claimed the highest perch on the cat tree. He looked out the window, straight at the house of Elias. Julian laughed. He is already checking on his mother. And this was where the story took a turn that nobody expected. This was where it went from being a sweet adoption tale to something that truly took your breath away. Atlas did not forget Mira. Not for one single day. The very first morning after his move, Julian opened the front door to grab the newspaper, and Atlas just slipped right past his legs. He walked straight up to the porch of Elias, sat at the door, and let out one meow that was firm and almost commanding. Elias opened the door. Atlas walked in, found Mira on the window ledge, and sat beside her. They sat together for 20 minutes. Then Atlas stood, walked back to the door, meowed once, and headed home. And this became a daily thing. Every single morning, rain, snow, or sunshine, it did not matter. Atlas crossed that street. He visited his mother. Sometimes he groomed her. Sometimes he simply sat nearby. But it went even further than that. The gifts kept coming after that. A pine cone, a twig shaped like a letter Y, a toy mouse that Julian recognized from his own house, a sock, and once an entire small branch covered in bright red autumn leaves dragged all the way across the street. Julian watched all of this unfold from across the street, shaking his head in wonder. "You know what really gets me?" Julian said to Elias one afternoon. "Cats are not supposed to do this. The textbooks say they do not maintain family bonds after separation." Elias looked over at Atlas. The enormous cat was sprawled beside Mira on the porch, his giant paw resting gently over her small one. "Well," Elias said, "maybe nobody told him that. Some animals grow big, and some grow small. But the size of a heart is something you can only measure in moments like these. In the quiet crossing of a street every morning, in the gift of a golden leaf laid at the feet of a mother, and in the simple daily choice to show up and love without anyone ever asking you to." Atlas was the kitten everyone questioned, too large, too strange, and too impossible to explain. But he grew into the one who never forgot where he came from. He became living proof that love does not care about size or logic or what any textbook says it should look like. It only cares about showing up every single day. Thank you for watching this story. If this story stayed with you, please do not forget to like, comment, and subscribe.